Welcome everyone to the FY22 media briefing of the budget. Today's briefing, we are going to have some welcoming remarks by Governor McKee. Then he will be introducing Acting Director Thorson. Then he will be passing it off to OMB Director Romer and Deputy Budget Officer Joe Codiga will also be making a presentation. Throughout the presentation, I would encourage everyone to utilize the Q&A function on the bottom right of this screen. These questions will be submitted and we'll be able to track the questions internally, and then we are going to address them immediately after the presentation. Then after the presentation, if you can utilize the raise hand function, we will select on people to ask questions to the administration. Please raise your hand or email me via the instructions that have been sent. I will selectively unmute people to engage in dialogue with the questions. So without further ado, Matt, Chief, are you okay on your end? Please just give me 1 second, guys. I appreciate your patience. Just want to be very clear. Has anyone been able to hear me throughout this so far? Tony, I see your face. Jim, okay, thank you. All right, so without further ado, I'm gonna pass it on now to the Governor, Dan McKee. Matt, if you're able to arrange that, thank you. Just give me 1 more minute, please, everyone. All right. Shortly, we'll have the governor on to give some opening remarks, and then we will continue on with the agenda that I laid out. So thank you, everyone, for your patience.
So, Rob, we have the governor coming down to my office. They're having technical difficulties with computer equipment down in his office, so he's going to sit in my chair, and I'm going to move out of the way.
Excellent. Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it, Tony.
It's unmuted. You can go anytime. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry for the delay. We're in day 9, and here we go. So we all know this has been a very challenging year for Rhode Island. In addition to facing one time in a century health crisis, we have an economic crisis to address. A transition in state government that's like no other, and a crucial state budget to craft in a short period of time. And I want to thank everybody in the budget office that have been helping us through this process. And Jonathan and his team have been fantastic for us. Many, many hours, weekends and nights going over the budget so I could get an understanding on that. No secret that it's been difficult and unprecedented process, and I want to thank our budget team again for their work on this issue to deliver a sound budget for all Rhode Islanders. Knowing the challenges we face and the hard work that lies ahead, I'm truly honored and grateful for the opportunity to lead Rhode Island through this crisis and bring our state together. And we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think we all feel like it's within our grasp, and I believe it is. We need to pull together and plan carefully to beat COVID-19 and end this pandemic. My budget proposal sets the stage for doing just that. The single most important responsibility that we have is to ensure that we can support a successful and equitable recovery from COVID-19, and that means keeping Rhode Islanders safe and healthy, getting shots in arms as quickly as possible, and maintaining easy access to testing. Providing the resources to safely reopen our economy will soon become the highest priority. Get Rhode Island back to work and businesses back in business. And fully reopening our schools, getting students back in the classroom, and addressing the learning loss caused by this pandemic. In order to meet this moment head on, we need a strong focus on fiscal responsibility, equity, education, and reopening our economy. We recognize that in addition to this budget, Rhode Island will receive a significant amount of federal stimulus funds. With this in mind, this budget as presented today has the potential to evolve. Not only are we going to work collectively, collaboratively with the General Assembly to produce the best possible budget for Rhode Islanders, but we will also be intentionally about how we spend the next round of stimulus in a way that moves Rhode Island forward and makes all 39 communities stronger. I'd like to take a moment to personally thank our congressional delegation, Senator Reid, Senator Whitehouse, Congressman Langevin, and Congressman Cicilline, who have worked so hard to make sure Rhode Island receives its fair share of support and relief. And without that, this challenge would be almost an impossible task. While my number one priority is COVID-19 and getting shots in the arms, keeping people safe in the state of Rhode Island, my budget also looks ahead to the needs that will persist even after the threat of the virus subsides. The pandemic exposed issues that existed long before COVID-19 began, issues that were magnified by recent hardships from the opioid epidemic and gaps in the mental health services to the disproportionate impact on communities of color. It is our responsibility to address and provide meaningful support to all Rhode Islanders so they can achieve their full potential in all 39 cities and towns, and all the communities that make up our 39 cities and towns. Finally, small businesses, which are the heart of our economy and our communities, have faced difficulties due to the restrictions imposed to slow the spread of COVID-19. Business owners have done their part to adapt and be flexible, but now we must do our part to make sure these businesses have the resources they need to not just recover, but to be successful and come back stronger than they went into this pandemic. We can't do that in a vacuum. We need to work together. The unprecedented challenges in front of us continue to demand a strong, collaborative, and coordinated response. I hope as we review this budget proposal that it shows my commitment to working as a team with our General Assembly, our 39 cities and towns, our educators, and our local businesses. We've got work left to do, and it's ahead of us, and I'm very confident that we're prepared to take it on straight on. It's not going to be an easy task, but I hope that we're in this last leg of the pandemic, and as we shift into the economy and opening our schools, we will get it done. And as I said before, we're one team, and it only works if we all work together. And I appreciate everybody on this call, all the staff, the cabinet members, and everybody that's working for the state and any of the local committees, and including the media that's on the call today. I appreciate the spreading the word that we're ready, and I believe this budget will reflect our readiness. So I'll turn it over now to Director Woma, and thank you so much, Jonathan, for being here today to to give this information out to the public, the general public, through the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. I think we'd like to start with Acting Director Thorson for a few words.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm especially glad to be able to talk today because we get to share Governor McKee's first budget proposal. That's fiscal year 22. And assembling a budget proposal is a complicated and daunting task that uses a tremendous amount of internal resources. And so it's customary for everybody involved to thank the budget staff. But this year is different. And that's because, as the governor referred to, we're in the middle of a pandemic and doing it during a gubernatorial transition. I told Jonathan that it was like juggling chainsaws yesterday, but delivery of this proposal on time required not only a lot of heavy lifting, but consistent fiscal stewardship over the past year as we've dealt with a combination of both federal and general revenues, and being able to manage that, to be able to make sure that we were in a position so that over the past several months, the budget team would be able to put together a budget that would be able to be assembled quickly for Governor McKee, who sat through over a month of intensive daily briefings on the important budget choices that needed to be made to reflect the administration's priorities. So these are unusual times for sure, but I think this year especially, extra thanks are due to the budget team for their extraordinary effort. So I just wanted to make sure I stamped my feet when I said that, because it's very much true. But Jonathan will now take you through the budget details along with Joe Cadiga and provide an overview of the key initiatives in the proposal, as well as an explanation as to how we addressed the projected budget deficit and other issues. And we'll be happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So take it away, Jonathan.
Thank you, Director, Governor. Happy to see all this hard work and the dedication of our wonderful staff here at OMB really be realized through this budget. So first thing to talk about, I'm going to go through hitting the highlights of the budget across all the areas. I'm going to then turn it over to Joe Cadiga, who's going to go through in more detail how we close the budget. And then we are going to go to answering questions that all of you have been able to put in the chat function. Thank you for bearing with us in this virtual environment. It's all new to us too in this situation. So as the governor and the director mentioned, this has been a very extraordinary time to put together a budget. And in particular, the health crisis, and then layering on top of that, the economic difficulties have really been tremendous. If you recall back to the late summer, early fall, we were asking agencies for extraordinary amounts of reductions, not knowing what the federal situation would be or where the pandemic and the resulting economy would lead. I'm happy to say that many of those fears were not realized throughout this process. Through the steady hand of the recovery from the pandemic, as well as additional help from the federal government. It certainly is not a budget without sacrifices, but the worst that we had feared early on hasn't come to pass. So it's worth just sort of remembering the changes that have come from the federal government. Certainly, we had 4 stimulus packages early on. And then in mid-December, the legislature put together the FY21 budget. And then after that, there were some key events that have added to this particular budget situation. First and foremost, the stimulus package that passed in late December had vaccine and testing grants, which meant that we didn't have to use as much of the general revenue that the General Assembly had appropriated to us for some of those functions. In addition, the Biden administration made changes with regard to FEMA reimbursement. So these funds are also primarily used, not all, but primarily used for vaccine and testing, and had been reimbursable up to 75% of cost. They moved retroactively to 100% of cost. And this has freed up funds that we can use for other things directly and indirectly to help balance the budget. And then finally, there was a change with the match rate that we get for the Medicaid program, extending the emergency and extended the enhancing match rate, which also provided additional funds. Now, what this budget doesn't really contemplate are the details of the new Biden stimulus package. They were thankfully that is coming to pass, passing the House last night, and it looks like the president is poised to sign this tomorrow. Certainly, these funds will be very important because, as I've just described, a lot of the balancing we're doing are with these federal funds, and that leaves us with the need to help that balancing in future fiscal years. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of where the federal money has gone, and we certainly have more detail on this in the executive summary, but you can see the funds that were allocated and spent in FY20, and then the large amount expected and being spent in FY21. It looks like a relatively modest amount in 22, mostly because we haven't really processed any of that new Biden stimulus money yet, but those numbers are certainly going to go up pretty significantly in FY22 and beyond. Of the $330 million there, much of that is the rental assistance program that was in the December stimulus package of nearly $200 million. That is expected to be paid out over the course of the calendar year here. In addition, we do have expectations in COVID-related response activity that'd be financed with federal funds going into FY22. Certainly those are projections that are constantly changing, but in any circumstance, we would expect to spend over $100 million into FY22 on COVID response. So now that I've framed it a little bit, I'm going to go through some of the more important highlights in the budget regarding initiatives that we are recommending to the General Assembly. First, we are recommending an expansion of our medication-assisted treatment program in the Department of Corrections. This is a widely recognized program that we would like to advance further, so inmates who just arrive in the ACI may be eligible. We are proposing some enhancements in IT in the area of medical records and tracking of statistics to make sure that we are up to date and seeing the trends of this earlier pandemic. We are proposing $200,000 for recovery-friendly workplace that's leveraging other funds up to $450,000. And providing nearly $800,000 for supportive housing, housing being very important to helping individuals get on the right track. And then additionally, not on this page, but you'll find in the budget, is an expansion of an individualized treatment program in the Department of Corrections for $1.4 million. In the area of equity and social justice, we are including a recommendation to expand Rhode Island Works benefits that also incentivizes work. We are proposing an expansion of our home visiting program, leveraging federal funds up to $1.4 million, and expanding the clothing allowance to infant and toddlers. Currently in the state, we have a clothing allowance for school-age kids. This is moving it, like other states, to infant and toddlers. That dovetails pretty well with the childhood poverty proposals in the Biden stimulus plan. In addition, expansion of the food bank grant from the state and an increase in expansion of doula services. Some of the more really amazing proposals in this budget is our expansion of corrections reform. We are proposing changes to probation, given our some of the highest probation rates, having some of the highest probation rates in the country. We're offering proposals that would give credit to those serving probation to be able to reduce their sentences by approximately a third, and provide flexibility for technical violations, so individuals may not always be incarcerated with those violations. In addition, parole reform, offering incentives that take up to a sixth of one's parole sentence away, adding discretion for the parole board to limit reincarceration, expanding medical parole and geriatric parole, and offering an early parole consideration for those given long sentences before the age of 22. In addition, we want to incentivize a successful reentry. We're expanding the criteria for in-home confinement, creating an apprenticeship program for construction and manufacturing, and incentivizing participation in work release, investing in partnerships for DLT for post-release employment. In the area of long-term services and support, we are recommending a number of expansions and programs. Particularly in home and community-based services, we are proposing wage increases that also incentivize increases in home care certification, increases in shared living stipends and needs allowances, and restructuring our rates to make a market improvement in promoting assisted living at home. Those are focused around our Medicaid eligible programs. We also have a non-Medicaid at-home program that we would be proposing to expand eligibility from 200% of the federal poverty line to 250%. This will assist with costs of in-home adult day services. We're proposing to increase nursing home rates and proposing a $15 million transformation fund for our developmental disability system, improving integrated day, community day, and employment support programs. In Eleanor Slater Hospital, we are proposing to continue the transformation of Eleanor Slater, focusing on long-term care and the creation of an Institute for Mental Disease. As part of that, we are proposing a new facility on the Zamberano campus, adding $53.6 million in debt issuance to be combined with other resources to nearly $65 million to build a long-term care facility on the Zamberano campus. Will help on the transformation of the system and deliver best practices of healthcare. Small business support has been a very key discussion item of this budget. The small business community has lost a large amount of retail sales over the course of the last year. And we feel it in particular necessary to provide a bridge grant program until the new Biden administration stimulus can arrive. So with some of the money we've been able to free up in the federal funds discussion I talked about earlier, we are proposing to provide $30 million of CRF funded grants immediately in the current fiscal year. In addition, the budget funds $1 million for our current small business assistance program that focuses on lending. In the area of economic development, we are proposing to extend the sunsets for the commerce economic development programs till the end of the calendar year 2022. Expand the Rebuild Rhode Island tax program, raising the cap from $210 million to $240 million, providing an additional $3 million for the Real Jobs Rhode Island workforce training program, and expand the Wavemaker Fellowship by $400,000. We have a number of items in the area of housing. As I mentioned earlier, we have the $200 million from the December stimulus in the budget. That's being administered by Rhode Island Housing. They've started to take pre-registration on their website for that program, and it's expected to be paid out by the end of the calendar year. In addition, we have a proposal that builds on that by creating a permanent funding stream for affordable housing. This is done by expanding and making changes to the real estate conveyance tax, generating $2.6 million in FY22 and expecting $5.7 million in FY23 and beyond. This is done in two ways, by taking a little over 25% of the current GR that's generated by the real estate conveyance tax and instead dedicating it to this permanent funding stream. And in addition, creating an additional portion for residential properties sold above $700,000. Combined with this permanent funding stream, we're modernizing the organization around housing by creating a deputy secretary for housing and a new housing resource coordinating committee. In education, the administration supports fully funding the K-12 funding formula, which would be a nearly $35 million increase. We are proposing $6 million to increase childcare provider rates and an additional $200,000 to start a pilot program for those pursuing higher education to receive childcare. The budget also recommends 2 subject matter FTE, a transformation specialist to help underperforming schools, and a social studies curriculum specialist. The budget also includes an article to help us protect our electricity and natural gas infrastructure. It requires our providers to have an emergency response plan filed with the DPUC, and that those plans are active and followed in the case of a large outage. This legislation is mirrored by Massachusetts and in New York, and we think will go a long way to ensure that Rhode Island is back on its feet during a natural disaster. The budget also includes an adult use marijuana legalization. This is a market-based proposal, so not the state-run proposal proposed by the previous administration. It would have a competitive tax structure, so about a 20% effective tax on marijuana, with strong investments in public health and safety, and a tightly regulated market. In particular, there would be new retail license 25 rolled out each year for 3 years, with a special set aside for MBE applicants. We'd expect 25% of these proceeds generated by legalizing marijuana to go to administration, prevention, education, and law enforcement, with 15% of the proceeds going to communities, and then the remaining 60% going to the general fund. We're projecting that amount going to the general fund as $1.7 million in FY22, and about $17 million in FY23 and beyond. One of the reasons it's so much lower in the first fiscal year is there are additional investments we have to make at the beginning, and we're expecting a start date of April of next year. In the area of local aid, we are fully funding the car tax phase out. As I mentioned, fully funding the education funding formula, fully funding distressed communities aid, and then funding the pilot payments at $46 million, which is level funded with FY20, the last stable year we had for pilot payments. But obviously, if we're going to balance the budget, we can't balance it entirely with new investments or even the federal funding I alluded to. So one of the things we are proposing in the budget is raising the hospital licensing fee from 5% to 6%, generating $62 million for the state. This is particularly important because of all of the other resources hospitals have been getting over the past year, over $500 million. In particular, the December stimulus included an increase for the disproportionate share or DISH payment. So we are recommending fully funding that payment. The state kicks in a little less than half, and the federal government matches that to get to $70.9 million, which is over the hospital licensing fee increase that we are proposing. In addition, we are proposing to fully fund the statutory hospital COLA rate increases, as you can see here. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Cadiga, the Deputy Budget Officer, is going to run through some of the other areas that touch on how we're balancing the budget.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to run through one particularly significant revenue proposal, then I'll jump right into some slides that explain first at a high level and then in more detail how the projected budget deficit in fiscal 22 was closed in the governor's recommended budget. So to begin is the Paycheck Protection Program. You all may have heard about this program that provides forgivable loans to businesses who maintain certain standards such as employment throughout the pandemic. In the CARES Act, it was established that these forgivable loans shall not be considered taxable income. And that's something that was unusual to this program, in that forgiven loan usually is considered taxable income. The impacts of that on state revenue, the fact is that we are tied to federal definitions in the Internal Revenue Code for various components of our own state tax system. So that had an impact on state tax revenue, which was included in the November 2020 Revenue Estimating Conference. However, recently, in December legislation, the federal government changed course on a different tax impact of the Paycheck Protection Program, specifically the ability for businesses to deduct expenses that were used to help substantiate the PPP loans. So what that meant effectively for taxpayers is that they received a double tax benefit from the Paycheck Protection Program. These loans were forgiven, making them essentially tax-free grants. And in addition, the expenses that they paid for with those forgiven loans, they were able to deduct those from their taxable income. And that second change that was made in December was not included in state revenue estimates. And that provided an estimated, that provides an estimated $133.3 million revenue loss as far as state personal income tax and business tax revenue goes. That was something that was fortunate for those taxpayers involved, but something that created complicating factors when trying to, another complication when trying to balance the state budget. What Governor McKee proposes in this budget is leaving the tax benefit in place for most loan recipients, but taxing the portion of the loan above, the forgiven loan above $150,000. So what the budget proposes is that up to $150,000, the Paycheck Protection loan forgiveness shall remain untaxable, but the amount of any forgiven loan above $150,000 shall be taxable. And as you can see, that results in something around a $67 million recovery against that $133 million revenue loss that would otherwise be experienced. An important note here is that this is something that actually, I think the first item on the list that Governor McKee highlighted in his transmittal letter of if additional revenues were to be available, which it's possible that that may be the case now with the Biden stimulus. This was the first item on his list of things that he would like to reverse if he had to. But given the unexpected and significant revenue impact that this change had, this was thought to be a reasonable compromise that preserved the tax benefit for many small businesses, but recovered some revenue to help balance the 22 budget. Next slide. This graphic shows you the estimated deficit that in late December, the budget office had estimated, and the various actions included in the governor's recommended budget that helped to close that deficit. So $336 million represents the deficit that the budget office estimated in late December, around the time that the fiscal 21 enacted budget was enacted, that we needed to come up with solutions to close. That assumes that current service spending would continue. So we did our best estimate of what would it take just to maintain current levels of services. and no expansionary or contractionary items. And also it assumes that revenues would continue in line with adopted estimates, with the only exception being that this assumes that in 22, the 5% hospital licensing fee would be enacted. So working our way from left to right, the first several items are significant federal actions that helped to balance the budget. And then moving to the right, most of those are state actions. The first thing you'll see is the fiscal 20 and 21 FEMA to 100%. That $118 million represents the increased federal revenue that we would receive as a result of FEMA reimbursement moving from 75 to 100% in fiscal 20 and 21. So some of this benefit was retroactive in that we had already pledged CRF dollars or general revenue to satisfy the state match. And now that general revenue or CRF could be reassigned to other priorities, such as helping to close the deficit. The next is enhanced FMAP. That's associated with the continuation of the public health emergency, announced, I think, first in early January, and then signaled in late January, I think January 21st, that it would continue through the end of this calendar year at least. So this is assuming that the 6.2 percentage point increase to the federal Medicaid reimbursement rate will persist until at least the end of this calendar year, or through the end of this calendar year. And that is an $84 million savings, which represents reduced general revenue expenditures that are no longer needed. The next two items are that kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back of the $133 million revenue loss by the December action of the federal government to change the rules around deductibility of PPP expenses, and then followed by the $68 million recovery of revenue related to the decoupling from federal definitions of taxable income related to PPP forgiveness for the amount of loans over $150,000 per taxpayer. Next is the deferral of RICAP. As you may be aware, in fiscal 20, the state made a $120 million withdrawal from the colloquially known rainy day fund. In state law, unless some other action is taken, it is required that we pay back the rainy day fund in the year following the withdrawal. And the mechanism to pay back the rainy day fund is we actually pay back the Rhode Island Capital Plan Fund. That's how it flows back into the rainy day fund effectively. And in the fiscal 21 enacted budget, the General Assembly proposed and the governor concurred that the repayment of RICAP would be $90 million in fiscal 21 and $30 million in fiscal 22. In the governor's recommended budget, the repayment schedule is $7.5 million in fiscal 21, $42.5 million in fiscal 22, and $70 million of the RICAP repayment is now deferred until fiscal 23. So that will be an obligation of the state in fiscal 23 unless the law would be changed again. Also something that in the governor's letter, he has indicated a willingness to consider that as an option of if additional revenue were available to pay back sooner. Many of these items are. They were tough decisions needed to balance the budget. The next item is $62 million of increased revenue associated with increasing the hospital licensing fee from 5% to 6% in fiscal 2021. And also enacting the hospital licensing fee at 6% in fiscal 2022. The next item is the net of all other revenue changes. Other than those things highlighted on this slide, there aren't major as in you can see that they only total to 17 million revenue changes within the 21 or 22 budget. I'll go over some of the things that are included in this $17 million figure. One item to note is something that depresses the total slightly is that the 22 impact of marijuana revenue is only $1.7 million. It does increase to a larger number in later years, but due to the upfront costs there, the impact is not significantly felt in the 21 or 22 timeframe. And then the final item is net expenditure savings and adjustments. There are many puts and takes on the expenditure side of the budget, some increases and decreases, but on net, what is shown here is a $55 million reduction. And that brings us to below the zero line, so it closes the deficit plus a slight amount more. We move to the next slide. I can share some details of where we started and where we ended up. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but they're provided for your reference to show how we arrived at the calculations. So this first slide shows in fiscal 21, it shows the budget as enacted. And in fiscal 22, it shows the budget office current service level. So our projection of what normal expenses would be in without any major policy changes in fiscal 22. The only place where we deviate from enacted estimates or adopted estimates are we assume that the reenactment of the hospital licensing fee would have occurred at 5% in our current service level here. And it totals in the bottom right, it projects a $336 million deficit. The next slide. The next slide shows the deficit solve. So it shows the changes to the current service level that were necessary. We see we received some favorable changes in the fiscal 2021 opening surplus. If you've been following along with the final closing report, you'll see that there were various accounting adjustments there that shifted the recognition of certain receivables from one year to the next. But on net, we are projecting and budgeting for a $16.7 million increase in the fiscal 21 opening balance. Various changes to revenue impacting both years, notably including some of the items that I've already mentioned, like the PPP impact or the hospital licensing fee, among various other smaller items. And then in fiscal 22 expenditures, some of these expenditures were due to the things that I've referenced, such as the federal actions like FMAP and FEMA changes, also some state actions such as the RICAP deferral and various other expenditure items, which I'll go into in a minute. The next slide is just provided for your reference, and it's just the difference between the previous two slides if you want to follow along. I won't get into this. The next slide. You can take a look at the executive summary and the associated documentation, which we can provide to you for a full list of items, but I wanted to cover a handful of items that were not mentioned in Jonathan's presentation, just to let you know the character and some examples of the revenue and expenditure changes that were included in the governor's budget. On the revenue side, the fiscal 21 enacted budget assumed a $18 million reduction in revenue from the casino closure during the pause. When the actual figures were tallied up, that was about $5.7 million less. So it was actually something around a 12-point-something million dollar revenue loss due to the casino closure pause. So we were able to book a $5.7 million favorable adjustment there. Due to the interest rate environment, we've had some favorable bond refundings in the amount of about $5.9 million net. Adult use marijuana, as I mentioned, there's $1.7 million of general revenue included in the 22 budget for general revenue from marijuana. That will increase to around a projected, I think, about $17 million in the following year. But due to the fact that there are startup costs and that the program won't be fully operational until well into the year, the first year revenue is significantly lower than the annual revenue going forward. There are various smaller items at DVR, DLT, DEM, and CRMC that total to just over $5 million, in addition to removing the collections unit sunset, which would extending that program into 22 would yield an additional 1.4 million. On the expenditure side, there are net savings for the voluntary retirement incentive of $6 million. That assumes that some incentive payments are paid out this year and that there is some savings next year as employees are replaced with individuals that don't qualify for the same longevity payments as those that they're replacing. Sorry, lost my screen there for a second. There is also savings associated with the Eleanor Slater Hospital transformation that Jonathan had mentioned, and the Rye class alternative placements of $38.7 and $4.5 million respectively. A savings initiative at the Department of Corrections of $3.1 million. Various changes at EOHHS totaling $8.7 million. And noting this final item in terms of magnitude, it's a $4.3 million item, so it's worthy of note, but it is funding for potential settlement related to the manner in which payments were made to employees and to the LIUNA pension fund. So it's budgeting appropriately in case that payment needs to be made. So on net, these items, in addition to some others, contribute to 17 million in new revenue included in the budget. You'll see some of it is recurring, some of it is non-recurring, and $55 million of expenditure changes and adjustments. And with that, I believe that's my last slide, and I'm glad to pass it back to Jonathan or Robert to moderate any questions.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to try to walk through some of these questions, and we've been kind of trying to group them as we go along. So bear with me. Certainly, if you can still keep adding them into the chat function. So first, on Eleanor Slater Hospital, there were more questions about the proposal and what the construction looks like and the time frame. So a little bit more detail on that. The cost estimate's based on a 98,000 square foot facility with 85 beds. Again, this is a long-term care facility with the focus being, on the kind of patients that we currently have in the Zamberano facility. It's estimating to cost about 65 million through a debt issuance. That's really 53.6 of new debt and 11.3 of existing debt authorization. And construction, design, procurement has all got to take place. So that's expected, to last around 3.5 years or so. A question was asked about the 100 FTE that we're eliminating from BHDDH. And just to be clear, BHDDH is 117 FTE below their cap. So none of those changes are expected to affect actual individuals, but is really meant to sort of signal the fact that the expansion back to some of the older view of the hospital isn't really possible going forward. There's some further questions about patients in the hospital, and we're going to try something here. So we have Director Power here on the line, and I think she'd be in the right place to answer those questions. Director Power, are you there?
I am here, Jonathan. Thank you. I'm just not sure I'm seeing the same question that you are about the patients in the hospital. Is it that people are concerned about the patients being moved when the construction and renovation goes on? And that's what I'm understanding from what you're saying.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different questions, and I guess maybe it's easier if I that I kind of read some of them out.
Okay.
Do you expect to eliminate more FTEs as this plan moves forward? If so, can you provide specifics?
Let me start with that. Yeah, there's no more FTEs other than the ones that you reported on. And those were the ones that were coming out of both Eleanor Slater and Ryclass, but there's not an anticipation that there would be more than that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
No, thank you for that. And then what will happen with the existing patients of Zamberano during this time of construction?
They will stay there. We understand that and we're not DCAM, so DCAM is giving us information about moving forward on the design and construction, but the intention is those patients will stay in that facility and we will make sure that we work around those units. And if we're going to construct new units, then they can stay in the old units as we construct the new units. So there's no intent to move any of those patients.
All right. Thank you. So moving on to the topic of adult use marijuana. Director Tanner, do you see some of these questions?
Yes, I do. Am I free to read the question and then provide an answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the first question was, do you have any thoughts on the cannabis legislation introduced this week in the state Senate? The Department of Business Regulation and the governor's office are reviewing the Senate proposal, but I do want to mention that Senators McCaffrey and Miller have clearly put a tremendous amount of thought and effort into their proposal, and we look forward to the opportunity to dialogue with them and the whole General Assembly on their efforts. My second question here is, how will the tax rate on marijuana keep us competitive with our New England neighbors who already have legalized marijuana? The answer is that Massachusetts does have a 20% tax rate, and that this budget, the Rhode Island budget, proposes an effective tax rate around 20%, which is 7% sales tax, 10% additional retail tax, and a wholesale tax that is expected to equate to an effective 3% tax rate. And those are the only questions that I have so far on marijuana, Jonathan.
Dr. Tanner, moving on from that, there was a question about the beach parking fee increased proposed from Squamicut State Beach. Director Coit, are you able to respond to that?
I am here. In terms of beach fees, the budget includes an article that would allow us to raise them. They are set by regulation by DEM for Misquamicut Beach only. You may recall there was a study that demonstrated that our beach fees were low and very much under beach fees that municipalities and private beaches charge. We plan to do a regulatory process before the season to increase the fees at Misquamicut, which is our largest beach, our most popular beach, our most crowded beach, and the one that's gotten the most of a strip with other businesses that are affected. We will do that, as I said, by regulation. So while the budget contemplates a certain amount of revenue, we have to set that through a public process. Through experience, we know that any large increase at once is often unwelcome, but we'll get public input and do that through the regulatory process.
Moving on, there were a number of questions about more detail on the real estate conveyance tax proposal and our permanent funding stream. Joe Cadiga, could you do a comparison on the current real estate conveyance tax, what was proposed last year, and how those two things then differ from the proposal this year?
Sure, I think I can speak to the revenue components anyway. Last year, if I recall, the governor proposed a new tax bracket to be dedicated to the Housing Production Fund that was equal to $2.30 per 500 on the portion of the transaction over $500,000. This year, Governor McKee proposes increasing that threshold to $700,000. So the rate applied to the portion of the purchase above that $700,000 threshold is the same as it was last year. It's just it's applied at $700,000 instead of $500,000. Additionally, I believe last year was silent on which properties, which types of transactions this would apply to, and this proposal limits it to residential. Next, I believe that last year there was no general revenue associated with the proposal. This year, the real estate conveyance tax is divided up among various uses, one of which is general revenue, and this proposal dedicates 16 cents of the per $500 of the state's general revenue share of the real estate conveyance tax, so some of the base to the Housing Production Fund to help make up for the revenue loss associated with increasing the cap to the threshold to 700,000. And I believe that the bracket above 700,000 yields 1.7 million in 22 and $3.8 million in the next year. And the 16 cents, a half year of the 16 cent transfer of the existing real estate conveyance tax yields 862,000 in 22 and about double that, 1.9 million in 23 and thereafter. So the goal was to increase that threshold upon which the new tax would apply, and also to dedicate some general revenue to the fund in order to get to a comparable number.
Thank you, Joe. There were a few questions around the new stimulus funds that would be coming down from the Biden administration. We're continuing to analyze that bill, and the guidance documents that come out even after the bill is signed are going to be really important to really understanding how much the state will receive and in what portions. There's certainly some centralized funds that are around 1.1 billion, but there's also a lot of specific pockets. I'd turn now briefly to Jeremy Leach, who runs our COVID compliance office, for any further comments.
Thank you, Director Womer. Yes, Senator Reed's office has estimated that the largest broad-based bucket of funds that the state will receive is in the amount of $1.1 billion, but there will be substantial funds for K-12 education, housing assistance, both rental relief and foreclosure prevention, mental health and substance abuse funds, additional LIHEAP. There are so many other pots of money, I'm losing track of them here. In addition, there will be a lot of money for childcare and higher education. So we are studying all of this very, very closely, but we won't know specific amounts for days and weeks and maybe even in some cases a little bit longer as the Biden administration implements the law.
Thank you, Director Leach. There's also a few questions about the DD Transformation Fund. One thing I didn't mention in that slide is we're also funding the advance payment initiative that Director Power announced in the fall, costing nearly $3 million in general revenue and estimated at $6 million in all funds. But Director Power, can you say a few words about the DD Transformation Fund, how it will affect direct care workers in DD service?
Certainly. Yeah, certainly, Jonathan, I could do that. one of the things that we're really feeling very positive about is that this budget provides $10 million in general revenue and $5 million in federal match in fiscal 22. And that is really going to help us at the department to support the structural reforms that we've been working on with the private developmental disability providers over the last year. In particular, we've tried to make sure that we did some COVID-19 pandemic investments so that the provider community could get through the pandemic period, and helping them to weather the storm in terms of a very difficult time in terms of delivering services. But this particular investment is going to help us move to do some, I think, specific structural improvements and structural reforms that are not only going to improve overall individual care for individuals with developmental disabilities, but will, I think, increase the level of relevance and sophistication in the provider community to ensure fiscal sustainability. That's really our issue here, is that we want to build a stronger DD community provider system that's fiscally sustainable. And we want to make sure that this is not only increases the viability of the providers, but increases the opportunities for employment and day treatment programs for individuals with developmental disabilities. So we're very excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I'd also add that, some of the investments I flagged on the LTSS slide are also, relevant here. A 39-cent increase for home health agencies that certify that 30% of its staff have obtained a behavioral health certification through approved training, and then some of the other increases for direct care workers. Let's see here, making sure that. So we had some questions about how the $200 million of rental assistance would be spent. I don't know if Kim Ahern or Secretary Pryor wanna take that.
I defer to Kim and to you, Jonathan, but this is Stefan. I'm here if you wish for me to speak.
Hi, Jonathan. Jonathan, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was having some internet problems. We can put this in the chat, but this fund is going to be administered in collaboration with the Department of Administration and Rhode Island Housing. And Rhode Island Housing recently launched a website that has a number of details that I think I saw asked about in the chat. And so I believe that website is Rent Relief RI, and we can put that in or have Robert send that along. The team is working hard to get that launched with the recent updates to the federal guidance. That came a few weeks ago through the Treasury Department. And so we hope that there will be a launch of that program by the end of March, and we can circle back to make sure we connect the team that's asking here with Rhode Island Housing as well.
Thank you very much. There was a question about what we have in the budget regarding the arts community. We do have an increase of $50,000 for grants, and the continuation of the federal FTE that we added in the fall. There was a question about if layoffs are proposed. There aren't direct layoffs that are discussed in this budget. We certainly do have the early or the retirement incentive, where we've been able to lower some of the personnel costs at individual agencies by assuming that individuals would be hired with a lower rate than those that retired. I will say that, obviously the discussion around RI class and BHDDH does involve, though, a shrinking of those investments over time. Trying to look through all of the questions. There was another question about Eleanor Slater regarding the creation of the IMD and the long-term care facility. I don't know, Director Power, do you see that question, and can you take a stab at answering it?
I think that the proposal for the future of Eleanor Slater included looking at the revitalization of the Zamberano campus and looking at providing the continuation of the Benton facility, which is the forensic psychiatric facility. And in terms of the proposal going forward that we briefed to House Finance and Senate Finance in October, that proposal included closing the Adolph Meyer building, closing the Reagan building, continuing the Benton facility, and looking at the exploration and expansion of service units at Zamberano, which is what this budget reflects. The further consideration is looking at the fact that there are no federal reimbursement dollars that come in for forensic patients. So one of the considerations is that we're looking at, under the Eleanor Slater Hospital license, that we separate out the Benton facility and make it an IMD in terms of the services that are provided there, which are all general revenue funded. And we think that that makes sense in terms of the articulation of the licenses in the future is really the future footprint of Eleanor Slater, and looking at obtaining different licensures relative to the level of care that we provide. So we're looking at ensuring that the patients who go to Zamberano are the patients who need the longer term skilled nursing level care and custodial care, and the patients that will be in Benton as an IMD facility will be those that will come from the court that need specialized forensic psychiatric services. So that's the intent right now, and that's consistent with what we briefed to House and Senate Finance.
Great, thank you, Director Power. We're going to wrap up this session of the Q&A. We're going to start another session here. Just to let you guys know the order here, I have Ed Fitzpatrick going first, and Kathy Gregg, you're on deck. So Ed, I am going to unmute you, and you could go ahead and ask your question.
Just to ask about one item that's not in the budget, there was a lot of discussion about increasing the income tax rate on the highest earners. Why wasn't that pursued in this budget proposal?
It's a good question. Certainly lots of things were looked at in the course of the fall. As I mentioned, we were contemplating a very difficult budget in the late summer and early fall, and lots of different proposals were thought about. But with the advent of the federal money that we're getting, and in particular, just it's noted that federal money is being given to states to help minimize the economic impact and take less money out of the economies to be able to keep the economy of Rhode Island moving forward. So with that additional federal money, we didn't think it was necessary to raise taxes.
Thanks, Ed. Kathy Gregg, you could go ahead and ask your questions.
Okay, I have a few in a couple of different areas. One is, I was just struck by the words LIUNA Pension Fund. Why is the state taxpayer paying anything into the LIUNA Pension Fund? Can you just explain that?
Yeah, and we can certainly get you more details, but I can certainly give you the crux of it. It looks like in discussions with LIUNA, the state's been paying LIUNA members incorrectly for a number of years, based on their contract, how it was sort of like, programmed into the payroll system. And so based on that incorrect payment, we've been working with LIUNA on an estimate of what payment would make sense. And right now that estimate that's in the budget is where we think that is lending.
I'm asking a more basic question. Why are we paying them anything, let alone discussing how much we should pay them? It's a separate private pension fund. We have a pension fund.
One clarification to offer is that a portion of it might be back pay and a portion of it might be contributions to the pension fund. It essentially has to do with payments that were negotiated to be employee, the distinction between employee and employer contributions. The way that these were implemented had a side effect of an unintended consequence of impacting how overtime and pension contributions were calculated. So it's correcting for the errors, potential errors that were caused in how fringe benefits, pension contributions, or overtime may have been calculated over the years. And this was compensation that if this situation resolves itself in the way we think it might, it's correcting for what they should have been paid all along. So it's not anything above what probably or could have been happening all along, should have been happening all along. If it's
okay, I'll ask one more time and then I'll go to the next one, because I'm not hearing what I'm at, an answer to what I'm asking, which is the state contributing any money, any taxpayer money, to the LIUNA pension fund on behalf of any employee? And is that part of their compensation?
Kathy, I will happily follow up with you right after this.
Okay, I'll go to the next question, but please understand what my question is, because I'm getting an answer that's not getting to the heart of it. Moving back.
So really quick, Kathy, really quick, just want to let everyone know that James, you're on deck, and then Patrick Anderson, you're after. So Kathy, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I do want to go back to what's happening at Eleanor Slater. And, we all know decades ago, we did stories on the deinstitutionalization of the mentally ill, and that was a very deliberate policy. And now I'm hearing the words Institute for Mental Disease, and it sounds like we're going back to the future here. So I'm not exactly clear, and Kathy Power did answer part of it, but how is this different than what we closed decades ago?
Well, this is Kathy, and it's different in the sense that on one level, we're trying to be as reflective of what is the current requirements relative to least restrictive care. And in one sense, it's not necessarily different in that we are deinstitutionalizing people who may have been in institutions for a long period of time and could in fact be thriving in other conditions. So I know that some people have characterized this as a realignment of the former hospital, and the decreasing census over the last probably 20 to 30 years has really been driven by the fact that most people are keeping individuals at home or are looking for alternatives for community placement rather than sending them to hospitals like they may have done in generations previous. So now, because we have this opportunity to take a look at the status of every patient, in some cases, it is a deinstitutionalization process because there are many individuals who've been in the hospital for a long period of time. and may have never been given the opportunity to consider living in a community placement. Frankly, medications and care coordination and other aspects of the healthcare system have improved immeasurably over the last several decades. And so individuals who may have been sent to the hospital can probably and will probably live in community settings that are not necessarily meaning that they will live in the hospital for the rest of their life.
I think I asked the opposite question. Who's going into the IMD? That's really what I'm getting at here, as opposed to, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we haven't created the IMD yet. There's conversation about whether or not the Benton facility would be a standalone IMD because there's no federal reimbursement and all of the patients that are there are psychiatric. All of the people that go into Benton are ordered by the court.
And anybody else?
Excuse me?
And anybody else other than the people ordered there by the court? If you're creating a new IMD, is it simply and exclusively for people ordered there by the court?
That's correct. That is the intent. The intent is that the Benton facility, which only treats forensic psychiatric patients ordered by the court because it is a specialized facility, would be for that purpose only.
Thank you.
All right, Kathy, thank you. Now, I'm going to James here. James, you can go ahead and ask your question. James Nanny. All right, we'll come back to James. Patrick Anderson, finding you to unmute. Patrick, you could go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Great, thanks. Which policy proposals are specific to Governor McKee and were not holdovers from Raimondo administration? That's one. And two, with the housing market and the the high-end housing market red hot right now, why shrink the reach and size of the conveyance tax transfer fee increase?
So I guess I'll take both of those. So I'll start with the real estate conveyance tax. And maybe that can be a microcosm into your first question a little bit. So, all policy proposals are, vetted through a long process, and certainly we've met on all of these for hundreds of hours. Generated by the different agencies and worked through with the OMB staff. So a lot of these go through lots of iterations. But, when looking at the real estate conveyance tax in particular, there were a few things to balance. One is that, what the tax rates are in neighboring states. Another, what we're already collecting and what we could afford to dedicate from what we're already collecting. And also balancing that against the additional federal money that we have coming in the area of housing and are expecting in the Biden administration. So we certainly thought it was important to keep the momentum going in this budget, but of having a permanent housing funding stream, but wanted to balance that against the federal stimulus and where we thought we were in the Rhode Island economy. So
why do you have to balance? I don't understand how one balances the other. By keeping the tax lower, you're balancing, you're benefiting the real estate transactions. What does that have to do with the stimulus?
Well, I mean, taking money out of the Rhode Island economy, in any case is anti-stimulating. And so when the stimulus is coming in from the federal government to support something, that's a balance.
Jonathan, this is Stefan. Would you like me to jump in too?
Certainly.
Sure, Patrick, it's Stephen Pryor. Another factor in favor of this more focused conveyance tax is that Rhode Island has, since the original proposal, received the $200 million in housing assistance funding from the federal government, and has placed on the ballot the $65 million housing bond, which was approved by the electorate. So there are more housing resources available to the state. We still believe that having a permanent funding stream that can be relied on through various economic cycles in the coming years is important, because ours is the only state in New England without such funding stream.
Thank you. And which are McKee's signature proposals here that were not carried over?
Well, I mean, certainly all the proposals in here were vetted very closely by the governor in the time that he was allotted, which, as I think he's mentioned today, he's on, day 9. But I would say, if I were going to tell you a particular signature proposal, would probably be the small business loan program that we've proposed of $30 million. I'm sorry, grant program that we've proposed of $30 million to bridge and support small businesses going into the next set of Biden stimulus.
Thank you.
Jonathan, I might want to add to that. Jonathan?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. I'm not sure the motor vehicle pause, phase out wouldn't have been paused under Governor Raimondo. I'm not sure if Governor Raimondo would have looked at the PPP loan forgiveness the same way. Those were other considerations. I'm not sure if Governor Raimondo would have looked at raising taxes on high income earners, although she'd faced those proposals in the past and had not gone forward with them. So those were big things to consider. And so I think that Governor McKee was very reluctant to raise taxes in light of the factors that Jonathan cited, in particular when there's a big stimulus designed to get the economy going. So Governor McKee looked at that very carefully.
Thank you, Director Thorson. Eli Sherman, you're up.
Thanks, Robert. I just want to be crystal clear with the FTEs eliminated at Eleanor Slater. In the budget, it says there's 100 FTEs that are getting eliminated. What you're saying is that there are no bodies currently in those positions, so there will be no layoffs as a result of these FTE eliminations?
Yeah, we don't have a breakdown at this point in terms of those positions. We are looking at, we're expecting, frankly, that the reduction is going to be achieved through attrition, through some more early retirement decisions, by leaving some of the positions open that won't be filled, and then going further as we close the Adolph Meyer building and the Reagan building, there may be some layoffs going forward. So we see it as really a combination of all of those potential issues.
Thank you.
All right, Eli, thank you. And then we're going to have one final question. Matt Ford, you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. To the folks involved with cannabis legalization, do you worry that the effective tax rate on cannabis will make the state non-competitive with what I'll euphemistically call established alternative markets, a hallmark, if you will, of a number of these rollouts nationwide has been that state taxes have essentially made the product almost irrelevant in the marketplace. And then I've got two quick follow-ups.
Robert, I'll take that.
Right ahead.
So the first states to legalize marijuana adopted fairly high tax rates. And so that was 33% in Colorado and as high as 47% in Washington state. And so states that have legalized more recently have generally adopted lower tax rates in line with the Rhode Island proposal. The goal is to be competitive with these alternative markets while also raising enough revenue to adequately fund the regulatory and public health needs from the adult use marijuana.
Have you actually performed any market studies? And I say that with a smile, but you know, it's a realistic issue.
We're part of a coalition of states who all share information on the market, their market studies and whatever else information that they have, so that we can all understand what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so there's about 15 states in that we work with. So that's how best we share information.
I guess I was with a smile saying the market being a variety of street corners and a variety of private influences in Rhode Island. But a question, why limit the rollout and the scope of the initial offering? Wouldn't it be more appropriate, given that there's an established business model in liquor stores, just to get this out as quickly as possible?
So the governor's proposal aims to roll out adult use retail licenses while maintaining a close eye on public health and safety. I think we're all concerned about that. The 3-year phased rollout of 75 licenses will result in a recreational retail density roughly comparable to Colorado and Washington state, both of which do have mature recreational markets and had been between 7 and 8 retail stores per 100,000 people, and in year 3 after their market launch. So Rhode Island's proposal would result in a little over 7.1 retail storefronts per 100,000 people by year 3 of implementation. And so rolling out these incremental controlled manner in an incremental and controlled manner will allow the state to monitor impact on the overall market and adjust policies and regulations as needed.
And then the final question, particularly in the first year, the potential for these licenses and these establishments could be quite lucrative, depending on what market prices turn out to be. Will there be an attempt by the state to prevent, if you will, revolving door / insider / nepotism style purchases of these licenses? Will they be done at true arm's length, and will they be conducted in a completely transparent manner?
Just like we are with the compassion centers, there will be a vetting with lots of information submitted by the applicants, and all that information will be online and transparent, and we'll perform a lottery just as we are with the current setup.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. One last one really quick. Brian Crandall, you have one question and then we're going to end this. Brian, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I know the question's been asked a couple different ways about the new federal stimulus. I mean, it's over $1 billion. How do you expect that could that drastically change what's been presented here today?
So in the executive summary, the governor has a letter about things that we should consider doing differently or changes to be made with additional federal money. So one of the largest is filling some of the capital and rainy day funds that we've had to use in the budget, reversing the PPP loan tax changes that we've made here in the budget, the hospital licensing fee that we have in the budget, investing more in K-12 tutoring programs, and fully funding pilots. So I direct you to that letter for a good specific list of things that are important to the governor that he's laid out in his letter at the beginning of the executive summary. And then certainly going forward, as I've mentioned, we're in the need of this stimulus to actually run COVID response into the coming year, and really to help with the budget in probably the next couple of fiscal years as we climb out of this recession.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's going to wrap up this press briefing. I want to flag for everyone that if you do have any follow-up questions, please send them my way. Everyone on this call should have my email address. Also, there is a strict embargo on the materials that were sent. That embargo lifts at 4 o'clock. I appreciate everyone's time and thank you. Have a great day.